Okay, first of all, let me just apologize to you. I tried to squeeze a 2-hour presentation into a 10-minute presentation, and I worked on this for 3 hours. We're not going to talk about all of this. I've got another week and a half with you. If you want to talk about all of this, the 5 years I spent at SFI, the science fiction I've written that, just explored epistemological collapse in the age of deepfakes, any of these things, the 400 paintings I made on 3 continents, all of that stuff. We can talk about that later. What I want to talk with you about is one little corner of the project I've been working on for the last year, which is called Humans on the Loop. It's grant-funded independent research and media exploring agency in the age of automation and wisdom in an ecosystem of magical technologies. Technologies we can't understand, but we can still interact with and co-evolve with. So I want to start in a kind of an awkward place because this is how they made figures in 1968. But these are two of the founders of the modern computing paradigm. This is J.C.R. Licklider and Bob Taylor, and they wrote a piece called The Computer as Communication Device, which says something that I think is really important. They said that their hope for computing would not be to scale communication, but would be to make communication more possible by helping people rotate ideas out of one person's head and into someone else's. Now, let's think about what actually happened. There's the fact that what we've actually got is an information scaling crisis instead, and this is where my academic background comes in. Like I mentioned in intros, I came in through thinking about the evolution of syntax and its relationship to the origins of complex cells, other major evolutionary transitions, multicellularity, social organisms. This is where we are now. Upper left, the wood wide web, mycorrhizal relationships. The upper right is an ancient map of the World Wide Web. And then down here we have control and psilocybin functional brain connectivity. I think you can kind of see that this looks more like the condition of society and the planet than this, which suggests a phase transition, and specifically in our ability to navigate this information. My buddy Josh DiCalio makes this point that what we're trying to reckon with is the ability to compress knowledge of all of these other scales into a human legible format, and that it's fundamentally flawed because we just can't do it. So I want to talk about pluralism, and I want to talk about the capacity of computers to help us represent knowledge in different ways. This is a lovely paper I discussed with Brian Arthur when I was still at SFI, talking about linear algebra versus algorithmic thinking and how they disclose different parts of the economy, the way that different brain imaging techniques disclose different aspects of our biology. Now, no one of these is accurate, or rather, no one of these is true or comprehensive. They're not a final statement. So this is as Josh says, what we have is epistemic specificity without ontological separability. We can't really make claims about the world in any kind of final way. Chaim Gingold wrote a whole wonderful book about the history of simulation that's coming out on my show soon, in which he basically says, that simulations are schemas, they're analogical domains, the distillations of a worldview, and that they change our idea of who we are. I want to give a nod to Kado McDow at Google, who launched the Artists in Machine Learning program there, and says that in an age of AI, the selves that we have are being reflected by our media as basically persistent vector embeddings, the probabilistic narratives that come out of all of these high-dimensional correlations. And that's interesting to me because I've had some experiences that remind me of that. I want to dogleg here for a moment and talk about a hip little project my buddy Van Bettauer put together called AskFuturefossils.com, which is his attempt to create the thing that I've been trying to do for years, which is to give people their own choice about point of entry into 9 years of podcast discussions and let them like examine it from different angles. So he created a topic model based on the show. This is an older version that's no longer live online. But the idea being that you should let people decide where they want to enter these enormous corpora with their own questions. And also, you should be making your own corpora. Like, you shouldn't just be expecting the big companies with the frontier models to do it for you. This is a more recent presentation of this. It used to be scalable. I gotta talk to Van, because that was the coolest part. It's not there right now. But you can see that like each of these conversations, one here with our buddy Phil Ford, one with my great inspiration, William Irwin Thompson, who invented this term Wissenskunst, knowledge art, which is sort of what I'm trying to do right now. Each one of these conversations crosses over all of these topic domains like a hyper trail. It's a path through all of these materials. So you can see, you start with correlations and like then you get narrative out of that. And then, if we had more dimensions, we could start talking about testing these narratives against each other and getting causal explanatory frameworks. But I want to take a real quick second dogleg and talk about games. Because the game that we're playing online right now sucks. This is my favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Proxy cards are available through third-party printers so that people don't have to pay the exorbitant fees in order to acquire the most competitive cards in the game. Most players live down here. They have implicit norms, cultural agreements about how they're going to meet each other at whatever power level. A couple people live up over here, and a couple people just love to optimize and don't mind that they're playing bootleg cards. But what this show, which I love, talked about was how basically like this is the greatest you get more interactions down here, you get more interesting, you get more choices. It's a more interesting game. The further you go to either side, the more narrow all of the options become and the more sort of boring. And it occurred to me that even though these people are not paying so much, they're narrow in their thinking, and that basically this is like making technologies more accessible to people, like making the most powerful technologies, is not really liberatory. It's just like getting everyone to play the same narrowly defined game. So the question became like, how do we do this? Which is related to Peter Todd's talk and other people's talks here about how we can encourage foraging. So, okay, here's a real world consequence of this. And it just happens that after a week of talking about high dimensional foraging, economist Robin Hanson, I just found this article today. He published while we were all at DISI about this. This is not high dimensional foraging. This is everyone converging on the same local optima and how it destroys innovation in the sciences. So, the good news is that there's this other crisis, that if we can solve the first crisis, we can kind of solve the second crisis, and that is that the models just keep getting worse if they keep eating their own excreta, right? So they need people that are in there, that are doing novel things, that are exploring the whole fan of possible vectors. And so I started thinking about this as like, well, what is the new interface? Years ago, when I saw this talk on combating hate speech on social media, I realized you can tell the quality of a conversation from space effectively, and yet that's not the way it's presented to us in news feeds. So I started thinking about like, oh, we could do like a virtual reality interface for social media back when the Twitter API was open. Give it that depth and dimensionality back. Like, get us back onto the savannah. These kind of rich, dimensional, structured information environments that our brains were evolved for. Video games have already solved this. This is a fantastic video I highly recommend you watch about Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and how they combined open exploration with like structured objectives in the video game. This is a map of somebody's activity over like 200 hours of this game. And I started thinking about what it would look like if exploring those vectors in huge data corpora could look like finding other people's paths on this and just being like, for Aeon, I've got a book coming out this fall, the show is really cool. Scan that QR code, I have stickers if you want them, thank you.